It happened during a long weekend a few years ago. My two hiking friends, Mark and Ethan, and I decided to spend the break climbing a mountain trail we'd talked about for months. The morning air was crisp, and the three of us were in high spirits. Our heavy packs didn't bother us much as we climbed, humming songs along the way. By early afternoon, fog began rolling through the trees, thick and sudden. Not long after, a fine drizzle started to fall. We were prepared for it. Rain jackets on, pace steady. According to our plan, we were just 2 hours from the mountain lodge where we'd stay the night. Then Mark stopped. His voice trembled as he said, "I'm so cold." When I reached out and touched his forehead, it was burning hot. His face was ghostly pale. Panic crept in. I knew this wasn't good. Ethan and I slung his arms over our shoulders and half dragged him up the trail. By the time we reached the lodge, we were 3 hours behind schedule, soaked and exhausted. Mark's face had turned ashen gray. We just wanted him to lie down and rest, but the place was packed, every room full, even the hallways crammed with hikers trying to escape the cold. I begged the caretaker to let us have anywhere to lay Mark down. At first, he hesitated, saying, "If you were healthy, maybe I could make space, but this..." He trailed off, clearly uneasy. I kept pleading, almost on my knees. Finally, the man sighed and motioned for us to follow. "There's one room left," he said quietly. He led us down a narrow corridor to a damp, dim room that smelled of mold, and something else. Something strange, metallic, and heavy in the air. In the corner, a figure was already lying there, wrapped tightly in a sleeping bag, perfectly still. I didn't dare ask questions. I just got busy making hot porridge to warm Mark up. We ate quickly, exhaustion washing over us. Around 7 that evening, we set up our sleeping bags, placing Mark between Ethan and me for warmth. Soon, the lights went out, and the silence of the mountain swallowed the room. But I couldn't sleep. I lay there staring at the wooden ceiling, my thoughts scattered. Then Ethan whispered, "You still awake?" "Yeah," I replied softly. "Can't sleep. You?" He hesitated, then whispered back, "Something's off about this room." I tried to sound calm. "Yeah, I noticed. Every other room's packed, but this one's empty." Ethan leaned closer, voice barely audible. "It's not just that. I went to the restroom earlier and saw the bulletin board near the entrance. It said, 8 missing, 1 dead. Doesn't that seem strange to you?" A chill shot down my spine. I remembered the stories, how some lodges, when accidents happened in the mountains, would temporarily store the bodies in a separate room, like a morgue. My mind flashed to the silent figure in the corner, wrapped tight in that sleeping bag. It hadn't moved all night. And that smell. I swallowed hard and forced a weak laugh. "Get some sleep," I said quickly, pulling my sleeping bag over my head. I shut my eyes and tried to pretend none of it existed. When morning came, the figure in the corner was gone. Someone must have moved it out early, before sunrise. The caretaker said later that the rescue team's helicopter had taken a body down the mountain that morning. Mark, miraculously, was fine. His fever had completely broken, and he was full of energy, even joking around. Both Ethan and I stared at him in disbelief. When we mentioned it, Mark smiled faintly and said, "Yeah, last night I felt really sick, like I was burning up. But then I felt this cold hand on my forehead, like someone was cooling me down. After that, I felt better." Ethan and I exchanged a look. Neither of us said a word, but the air between us grew heavy. Mark must have sensed it too. He chuckled and said, "Don't worry. Anyone who loves the mountains can't be all bad. If it weren't for that cold hand, I probably would have been the one flown down this morning." I forced a smile. But even now, when I think about that night, I still remember the smell, the silence, and the feeling that there was more than just the three of us in that dark, damp room. I've worked in mountain rescue for over a decade. I've pulled people off cliffs, out of rivers, even from snow caves where the air was so thin you could hear your own pulse. But there's one mission that still wakes me up at night. It happened a few summers ago. A man had gone missing during a solo hike. A 40-something experienced climber, the plan he'd left behind said it was a one-day climb, 7 hours up and down. But by the time his family reported him missing, he was 12 hours overdue. My partner and I were assigned to sweep the lower valleys and creek routes, areas easy to slip off trail. The day dragged on as we bushwhacked through dense undergrowth, calling his name, scanning for footprints. Nothing, just trees, rocks, and the endless hum of insects. Then, near dusk, our radio crackled to life. "We found him," came the voice from another team. "He's injured but alive, bringing him down now." I felt a wave of relief wash through me. Finally, some good news. My partner, Jeff, and I decided to stop and rest before heading back. We sat down on a patch of grass, dropping our gear beside us. That's when I realized I'd sat on something. It wasn't a rock. It was a small, boxy object, half buried in the dirt, an old cassette recorder, the kind people used back in the 80 seconds. The plastic was scratched, the battery cover missing. I popped it open. The batteries were corroded, long dead. But the tape inside looked intact. Jeff laughed. Probably some camper's mixtape, but I don't know. Something about it felt wrong, like it had been waiting there. We packed it up and brought it back to base. Later that night, curiosity got the better of us. I found an old tape player in the supply room, hooked it up, and pressed play. At first, just static. Then, a man's voice, shaky but clear. "Every night, I hear someone out there," he said, "calling." I thought it was another hiker, but when I shouted back, they didn't answer. "I don't think they can hear me." He sounded tired, scared, but not panicked yet, just confused. I'd heard that tone before from people stranded too long, half delirious from fear. Still, something about it made me uneasy. Jeff leaned closer. "Do you hear anyone else?" I shook my head. "Just him." The man on the tape had said someone was calling, but there was no other voice, not even faintly. We let the tape roll. The next recording clicked on with a hiss of static. The same voice, weaker now. "It's outside again," he whispered. "Every night, it gets closer." I thought it was a person, but I was wrong. God help me, I was wrong. "It's closer tonight. Please, someone, if you find this, help me. It's not stopping." The sound of his breathing filled the room uneven, frantic. In the background, there was something else, a faint scraping, like fabric dragging over rock. Jeff turned to me, whispering, "That's not the wind." I didn't respond. My throat felt dry. Then came the third tape. The voice was almost gone, crushed under panic. "He's here. He's right outside the tent. Please help." Static. "That's not human." Click. And that was it. Silence. We stared at the player. The air in the cabin felt suddenly cold. The others gathered around. Someone muttered, "Poor bastard." Another said quietly, "Guess the mountain got him." I reached for the player to eject the tape. That's when it happened. A sharp click. Then the recorder whirred again on its own. No one had touched it, and through the hiss of static, another voice came through. Low, deep, wet. It sounded too close to the microphone, like someone breathing directly into it. "Found you." The voice wasn't human. It was thick, distorted like it came from inside a hollow chest. The words vibrated through the room. Then silence. Real silence. Even the crickets outside seemed to stop. No one said a word. Jeff finally reached forward and yanked the plug from the wall. The tape stopped spinning, the lights flickered out, and the cabin was plunged into darkness. We didn't sleep that night. The next morning, we handed the tape over to the police. They promised to check if the voice matched any missing person reports. We never heard back. But here's the thing that still bothers me. The man we were searching for, the one who'd supposedly been found injured by another team, he never made it down the mountain. He vanished before reaching the base. No one ever saw him again. I was 8 years old when it happened. It's been more than 15 years. But even now, when I think about that day, I can feel my skin crawl. It was one of those warm, perfect afternoons. Clear sky, sunlight glinting off the leaves. My grandfather had decided to take me into the woods behind his house to forage for wild greens. He loved those trips. I loved spending time with him, even though I didn't really care much about the plants. We started on a neat stone path that eventually faded into tall grass and uneven dirt. I remember how the air smelled fresh, sharp, alive. Grandpa led the way, his old woven basket swinging at his side. Then, just before the trail disappeared into the thicker woods, he stopped beside a tall, thin tree. Without a word, he pulled a small glass from his bag, half full of rice wine, and placed it carefully at the base of the tree. I remember asking, "Grandpa, what's that for?" He looked at me then, his eyes suddenly hard. "When you're in the mountains," he said quietly, "you don't talk. The things here might hear you, and if they do, they'll come for you." Said. I nodded. I didn't understand, but something in his voice made my stomach tighten. So I kept my mouth shut and stayed close as we went deeper into the brush. For a while, everything felt normal, the hum of insects, the rustle of wind through the ferns. I got bored, though. Kids always do. I started dragging my feet, kicking pebbles, glancing around. That's when I saw it. By a small creek glimmering under the sunlight, a salamander half submerged in the water. "Grandpa, look!" I yelled, forgetting everything he'd said. "There's a..." And then the world stopped. The wind died. The birds fell silent. Even the water in the creek seemed to hold still. It wasn't just quiet. It was wrong. Like someone had pressed mute on the entire forest. I stood frozen, my mouth half open. Then Grandpa's head snapped toward me. His face, usually kind and calm, was pale and tight with fear. Before I could say anything, he ran at me, grabbed me under one arm, and started sprinting downhill. That's when the sound came back. Only, it didn't return. It chased us. It started as a whisper, a faint rustling behind us. Then it grew louder, closer, like 1,000 dry leaves grinding together, or fur brushing violently against trees. The air itself seemed to shudder. I clung to Grandpa's coat, crying, choking on my breath. "What is it?" I wanted to ask, but the words wouldn't come out. Finally, I couldn't resist. I turned my head to look. At first, I thought it was the bushes moving, like a wave of greenery sweeping toward us. But then I realized the bushes weren't moving with the wind. They were moving on their own. It was a shape made of hair. Dark, coarse, endless hair, writhing and twisting, pulsing like something alive. It rolled over the ground, swallowing everything it touched, dragging up dirt and leaves and stones as it came. It didn't have a face, or legs, or form. Just a mass of living fur that breathed. I remember screaming. Grandpa didn't stop. He just ran, teeth clenched, eyes fixed ahead. The sound followed us. The hissing, the scraping, the low, rumbling growl that came from somewhere inside that thing. The trees blurred around us. My vision went white at the edges. I could feel it right behind us, like the forest itself wanted to pull us back in. And then, light. The trees broke apart. The sky burst open above us, brilliant and blue. That's the last thing I remember. When I woke up, I was in my bed at home. My mother said Grandpa had carried me all the way back. He was sitting in the next room when I came to, silent, staring out the window. I asked him what had happened, but he just smiled faintly and said, "You must never talk in the mountains. Do you understand?" I understood enough, and I never brought it up again. Years passed. Grandpa's still healthy, still hikes those woods every spring. Every time he goes, he takes a glass of rice wine with him and sets it down at the base of that same tree. I don't go with him anymore. I can't. I used to think the mountains were peaceful. I grew up hiking with my dad. Fresh air, pine trees, cold rivers. It always felt like home. After I finished my time in the military, I figured I'd finally earned the right to challenge myself. Solo hiking sounded like freedom. Just me, the trail, and silence. There was a small mountain I'd seen online, nothing extreme. The reviews called it an easy scenic route, the kind of place you could stroll through in a few hours. My friends told me not to go alone. People go missing up there, one of them warned. I laughed it off. I left around noon that winter day. The air was crisp, the sky clear, and the sound of running water followed me up the trail. The scenery was perfect. Gold light filtering through cedar trees, the rhythmic rush of a nearby creek. Every hiker I passed smiled or nodded. It felt safe, familiar. Then, without realizing it, I stopped seeing anyone. The trail narrowed. The woods went quiet. Even the birds were gone. That's when I noticed the path looked unfamiliar. Muddy, uneven, swallowed by ferns. I must have taken a wrong turn somewhere. No big deal, I thought. I'd just backtrack. Except, every direction looked the same. Every bend led me back to where I started. I called out for help, but my voice came back as a whisper. My phone had no signal. The sun was already sinking behind the ridge. Cold shadows crept between the trees. I could feel panic rising in my chest. Then I saw her. Down by the creek, maybe 50 yards away, was a woman kneeling at the water's edge. Her long hair hung down over her face as she leaned forward, cupping water into her hands, washing her face. Relief hit me like a wave. I wasn't alone. "Hey!" I shouted. "Hey, excuse me." She didn't react, not even a flinch. I started toward her, slipping through mud and roots. The ground was slick, and the air grew colder the closer I got. My gut told me something was wrong, but I was too desperate to care. When I reached the creek, she was still crouched there, hands in the water. I caught my breath and said, "Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you. I'm lost. Can you tell me how to get back to the main trail?" No answer. She didn't move. I stepped closer, enough to see the pale skin of her arms. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Nothing. I reached out and gently tapped her shoulder. That's when she stopped. Completely. Her fingers froze mid-air. Her back stiffened like a mannequin. And then, very slowly, she turned her head. What I saw didn't make sense. Her skin was so white it looked painted on, like wet paper stretched too tight. Her face was wrong, no eyes, no nose, just a mouth full of deep, jagged cracks that looked like something had clawed at her. I stumbled backward, legs shaking. My throat felt dry. I couldn't breathe. She just stood there, her head tilted slightly, watching me, or whatever counted as watching for something without eyes. Then her head began to tilt farther, and farther, and farther until I heard a sharp, wet snap. Her neck hung at an impossible angle, her mouth still frozen open in a silent scream. That broke me. I ran. Branches whipped my face, mud clung to my boots. Behind me came the sound of something dragging through the brush, followed by a soft, rasping laugh. Not human. Too deep. Too wet. I didn't look back. I just ran until my lungs burned and the forest thinned, and somehow I stumbled onto a wide dirt road. Up ahead was a man in a reflective vest, holding a radio. A park ranger, or maybe a groundskeeper. I must have looked insane. Mud-covered, panting, eyes wide. He hurried over. "You okay, son?" I got lost," I said, still gasping. "Down by the creek. There was someone down there. A woman." He handed me a bottle of water and waited until I caught my breath. Then he said, almost casually, "You're not the first one to say that." "What do you mean?" I asked. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "People get lost here all the time. Some never show up again. Those who make it out, they talk about seeing someone, usually down by the water. We never find her." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just nodded, thanked him, and let him lead me down the mountain. I made it home that night. Alive. But even now, when I close my eyes, I can still see that face, the pale skin, the cracks, the way her head tilted like a broken doll. And sometimes, when I hear the sound of running water, I swear I can still hear that laugh, soft, distant, waiting. I haven't gone hiking alone since, and I never will. I used to be part of a mountain rescue team. I've seen things most people couldn't imagine. Frozen bodies, shattered bones, faces twisted by the elements. But there's one mission that never leaves me. Even now, years later, the memory crawls up my spine whenever I hear the sound of wind in the trees. It started like any other missing person report. A man in his 40s, an experienced solo hiker, had failed to return from a routine climb. The trail he'd chosen was moderate, a 7-hour round trip, well within his abilities. But by the time his family called for help, he'd been missing for half a day. We split into 4 teams. My partner and I were assigned to search the valley routes, places an experienced hiker might wander into if he strayed off the main trail. The day was humid, the kind of air that sticks to your skin. We followed the sound of running water, moving along the creek that carved through the gorge. At first, everything felt normal, but then, sometime after noon, something shifted. It wasn't a sound or a sight, it was a feeling, a quiet wrongness that seemed to hum beneath the surface of everything. That's when I heard it. A laugh. It came faintly through the trees, soft, breathy, almost human. I froze. Jeff, my partner, looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "You heard that too, right?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. Probably an echo or another team. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The laugh wasn't coming from ahead of us. It was coming with us. Like it was following, staying just out of sight. A few minutes later, we reached the first junction where 2 streams met. According to our map, there should have been a massive boulder there, a landmark everyone used to orient themselves. I'd seen photos of it before, a rock the size of a van. But the spot was empty, just an exposed riverbed in cold, rushing water. Jeff frowned. "No way! That thing doesn't just disappear." We double-checked the map, our compasses, even the GPS. The readings made no sense. The compass needle spun lazily, refusing to settle. The cliffs looked warped, like their shapes didn't match the terrain we'd studied. Then I noticed something else. Strips of red cloth tied to the trees, fluttering faintly in the breeze, leading deeper into the valley. "Trail markers?" Jeff asked. "Maybe," I said, "but they're not ours." Still, we followed. The farther we went, the narrower the canyon became. The walls rose steep and high, shutting out most of the sunlight. The air turned damp and cold. The sound of water grew hollow, muffled, as though the valley itself was swallowing it. By the time we reached the 3rd stream junction, the daylight had dimmed to a dull gray. That's where we found the backpack. It sat neatly beside the rocks, half covered in moss, next to a pair of hiking boots, placed side by side, like someone had taken them off carefully. The tag on the pack matched the missing man's name. But he wasn't there. Jeff crouched and opened the pack with gloved hands. Inside, waterlogged clothes, some food wrappers, and a small, soaked notebook. Most of the pages were unreadable, but a few lines were still legible handwriting, trembling and rushed. "I get it now. This valley isn't on the map. The compass doesn't work. GPS says I'm nowhere. I hear laughter in the trees. It's not an echo. I think this place connects to somewhere else. Somewhere that isn't here." I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't an ordinary missing person case. The man hadn't just gotten lost. He'd gone somewhere else. "Let's get out of here," I said quietly. Jeff nodded, and we turned back. That's when the real nightmare began. No matter which direction we walked, we ended up back at the same spot, the same backpack, the same boots, the same stream cutting through the rocks. The cliffs seemed to shift when we weren't looking, their edges subtly rearranging themselves. We tried marking trees, setting stones, counting our steps. It didn't matter. We were stuck. Time stretched. I don't know how long we wandered, but it felt like hours. The sound of the stream grew distorted, deeper, almost like a voice murmuring just beneath the surface. Jeff's breathing grew ragged. "Are we lost?" he asked, his voice breaking. Before I could answer, the valley shook with a thunderous crack like lightning striking right behind us. We flinched. And suddenly, everything was different. The air shifted. The cold lifted. The cliffs looked right again. The compass needle steadied. And there, resting in the middle of the junction, was the massive boulder we'd been looking for. We didn't speak. We just collapsed on the ground, gasping, drenched in sweat. When I finally looked at my watch, only 90 minutes had passed since we'd entered the valley. But I swear we'd been in there for at least 4 or 5 hours. We got out as fast as we could. At the trailhead, I turned around one last time. The mouth of the valley loomed behind us, dark, silent, almost watching. A breeze passed through the trees, and I saw one of those red ribbons twitch in the wind. 3 days later, the missing hiker's body was found 3 kilometers away, on another tributary. The official report said he died of hypothermia. But here's the part no one could explain. He was wearing his boots. So whose were the ones we found by the river? The file was closed as an accidental death. But I know better. We stepped into a place that wasn't meant to be found. A valley that doesn't exist on any map. Maybe that man realized it too late. And maybe that laughter we heard wasn't meant for him. It was meant for whoever came looking next.